honor for me to introduce the three panelists that we have for this equity panel. Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale, Virginie Diambu, who is the folks could please wind down the conversations. Virginie Diambu, the Racial Equity Director with CVOEO, and Sue Minter from Capstone Community Action. One of the things that we have really wanted to do, and we've heard from you as a network, is the importance of really being clear about not just the importance, but what does energy equity mean? And not just in theory, not just in the literature, but how do we put it into practice in terms of our processes and in terms of the design of programs and policies that center and put folks who have been marginalized in the past at the center of those programs and policies going forward. So it is now my honor to turn it over to Senator Ram Hinsdale, who's going to be our moderator for this event. Again, the Slido is open for your questions, and I think that Cara will post some of those at the end, and I'm going to invite, so Senator Ram Hinsdale and Sue Minter will be on the Zoom, and we're lucky to have
wonderful to be with all of you virtually this morning. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. For those who may not know me, Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale, I served as Vice Chair of House Natural Resources and Energy in my time representing Burlington. I now represent Chittenden County in the state Senate, and we'll be talking about an environmental justice bill later in the program that it echoes legislation I introduced in 2007. So environmental and climate justice, has been a passion of mine since, and I'm really thinking about something that was articulated to me in high school that stays with me. I was in a high school of 4,800 kids in Santa Monica. Stephen Miller and I would fight a lot about climate change. And I went to Bioneers in California and met Van Jones, who has had many iterations since then. But when I was in high school, he was the leader of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland. And his goal was to make Oakland crime-free, poverty-free, and carbon neutral at the same time. And he argued that you couldn't do one without the other. And that was the impetus for so much of what I did next, from joining the legislature to continuing on in my legislative service. And when I think about the two speakers for whom I'm privileged to moderate this panel, they really embody that spirit of trying to make sure that, brilliant speech, but I will continue on because I really want to get to our two speakers who I'm privileged to moderate this panel for. And they are people I consider mentors. And I was speaking about a kind of aha moment I had in high school around the crossroads between environmental and social justice. And I had a similar aha moment when I read an article where Virginie Diambu said, weatherization doesn't translate well in other languages. We don't have a word for this. And I'm sure Sue would agree that weatherization starts with a lot of gourmet concepts, even in English, that people who are struggling to put food on the table and work multiple jobs to keep a roof over their family's head are also not clued into. And so this panel is really about how equity is not an afterthought, and it's not apart from technical expertise. It's not even apart from grid optimization. Equity is the way forward on all of these fronts, because without it, we are going to lose the very people we need to stand behind our movement for addressing climate change and advancing climate justice. And so in that spirit, I wanted to, because of the technical issues, to sort of limit my need to be the one to introduce them. I'd love to start with Sue while we know that Zoom is working. Sue served with me in the legislature, served before me in the legislature, has gone on to have a number of distinguished roles and titles. And we're very grateful that she's leading Capstone Community Action and really paving the way for conversation around equity. Sue and then Virginie, I'd just love for you to start by talking about your journey to the position you're in and how equity plays a central role in the work that you do.
Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here with you, Senator Rom Hinsdale, as well as with you, Virginie. Is it working and can everyone hear me? I'll assume it is unless I hear other words. I also just want to thank everyone for being at this conference. Thank EAN for hosting a hybrid conference. We're all persevering, and I think it's going to be great to work in these mediums because I wasn't able to be there in person, and I'm glad to be here. I also want to really appreciate EAN for forging and prioritizing equity in this conversation around our transformation and our climate work. Senator Rom, I appreciate Rom Hinsdale. I so appreciate your asking about the journey. I do want to say, first off, that as a white woman of privilege, I want to explain why I'm on this panel. And I think it does have to do with that journey where as a legislator and a community member and activist, I've been involved in sort of environmental activism over my entire life. I had a particular passion around transportation and climate and how do we sort of move our fleet and reduce our greenhouse gases in that sector, which, as everyone knows, is the largest contributing sector to our problem here in Vermont. So after many other exciting journeys in the political world and in public service, I found myself almost 3 years ago the executive director of an amazing organization, Capstone Community Action, which is one of a network of community action agencies that were formed in the anti-poverty era of the mid-1960s, really fueled, of course, by the civil rights movement. So while many people may not know about us, that is our mission, helping move people out of poverty. By providing services to meet people's basic human needs, especially in crisis, and that includes food, heat, and housing, but also to help move people into economic security by having strong families through Head Start programs, warm and healthy homes through our weatherization, our low-income weatherization programs, and through workforce and economic opportunity. I have to say that as someone who had spent a lot of time in the legislature, I immediately kind of began engaging in the climate discussion from this new perspective, wearing this new hat. And in the first session, I guess maybe 3 years ago, was part of a wonderful coalition of a broad coalition of groups. And we were talking about electric vehicle incentives. And I began to say, those are important, and most of the people in Vermont will not be able to afford those. So what are we going to do to actually incentivize new behavior, new patterns of purchasing for low and moderate income people? I will also say that I've learned a lot very quickly in this job. I've learned so much about the breadth and depth of poverty and the overwhelming challenge to our entire country at this time and how it's different than a decade ago. One story, early in my tenure in this job, a family advocate for our Head Start program in Morrisville pulled me into her office. She said, Sue, you have to do something about these inspections. I thought, inspections, is this an eviction issue? Is it a home inspection? No, this was a car inspection. And here's the story. This family, 3 children under the age of 8, 2 of whom were in our program, had been living in a storage container. They were homeless. Our family advocate and others helped the 2 young parents achieve more financial security through 2 good jobs. They then got off of the housing wait list and into an apartment. But when they had to get their car inspected, they couldn't afford the new improvements that were required. So they continued to use the car uninspected until they were discovered by law enforcement and their car was taken from them, which meant that they couldn't go to work and couldn't keep their job, nor could they keep their home. And now we were trying to help them stay safe in a campground over the summer. but what was I going to do about these inspections and the people losing their access to financial security? That was the beginning of a very interesting session in the legislature. So we tried to actually look at both of those problems. It is clear that in the world of people who struggle just to put food on the table, affording a car is not even an option. And I want to just quote a report from the Reach Up program to the legislature that says, in Vermont, vehicle ownership has the highest correlation to upward social mobility. So that is why we aggressively pursued a program that eventually became known as Mileage Smart. So it took a while, I will say, for the environmental community who was pursuing aggressively all electric vehicle incentive program to go along with this other proposal. It didn't happen in the House, but it happened in the Senate. And I want to call out Senator Perchlik, as well as former Senator Ash, who listened and made it happen. And we began this program, which is a small program, but impactful. We have one staff person for the entire state who by now just reported to me this morning, we have sold 133 cars. These are with an incentive. These are used cars. You have to be 80% of the area median income. That's the eligibility. 67% of these are conventional hybrids and 33% are EVs or plug-in EVs. So we are moving the needle on all electric while we make access to cars. I want to quote someone who says, I can't say thank you enough. I have a car I have dreamed about owning, and all because of this program. Your responses have been amazingly fast, and I'm now the proud owner of a Toyota Prius. I'm so proud to be able to do my part and have fuel efficient and ecological car. And that's because low-income people, like high-income people, care about their environment. And it's why we must be seeing equity and climate action together. Because most people don't know that we even have a Mileage Smart program. And through the administration of this program, again, one person is doing all of this for the whole state because the legislature only allowed a little bit of money for staffing. And of course, that isn't actually covering the full costs, but Capstone is raising money to make sure we have at least that one person and that we keep this program growing. I want to conclude quickly by one of the things we've come to know, and actually we knew it when we started, which is that low-income people do not have the same access to capital as many of us are privileged to have. They may not really understand how to keep a family budget, how to get out of debt and establish credit, let alone have a savings account and an ability to get a loan. So some of our work, a great amount of it, is helping people through that process. And that is why this year, working again with the legislature, and this time I want to call out Senator Bray and Senator Westman of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy, whoops, I didn't say that right, I don't think, committee, who said, how can we actually get the families that we're supporting through our weatherization program to think about transportation? And they embraced a concept that we're just beginning called financial and energy coaching. So the community action agencies are now establishing a network to help folks get through the financial barriers and into car ownership and other energy efficiency options. I want to say that these have not been established through the voices of people with lived experience. And that's why what we're doing with Just Transitions now, and we can talk about it in questions, is so important because we know we have to develop programs with the people who we serve. It is important to help get advice and support from us in the legislature, but we want more voices at the table. And that's where I'll end at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Virginia, you've been really patient up there at the podium. Didn't know you'd have to stand for most of this. And you're also welcome to sit down, at any point during the conversation and come back to the podium. But Virginia, you've had a lot of, I would say, success in changing the paradigm about new programs and new solutions that need to exist altogether. Can you talk a little bit about your journey at CVOEO and how you've really changed the conversation to center equity?
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for having me. Thank you for this opportunity. I landed in Vermont about 15 years ago without knowing English with my family, sick husband, and 4 children. And I am a radiologist physician and could not find a job. So I started with being a medical assistant in one of the medical facilities in Burlington for 9 years. And I don't even know how I did it because without no language skills, working in a very fast paced environment where providers were booking themselves sometimes 2 or 3 times within a 15-minute visit. It was really hard, but the internet system, the computer system with all the signs, the clinical signs helped with. So since I have a background of medical doctor, so I could imagine the story of the patient based on maybe 1 or 2 clinical signs that I got. So then I got hired at the University of Vermont, the Department of Pediatrics, and in that setting, I was able to connect to another program. It was a screening program for substance use and mental health issues. And that way I started to really realize how the use of drug in the youth community, especially the youth community of color, was really high, how mental health was really affecting community members. So I got interested. I was like, this is really a field that I would like to explore more. So I did work in that field for 4 years. And then going forward, I decided also to take classes, leadership and policy classes at the University of Vermont, doctoral level. And so to kind of have a better understanding of the policy, the procedures, I mean, have a better sense of how I could get myself involved in helping the community, especially the French-speaking community. And in that setting, I saw that ad, the racial equity position at the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. And based on my personal life experience, based on my medical background, based on the studies that I was doing, the leadership and policy studies, so social justice courses, based on the suffering that I am able to see in the community, I decided to apply for that job. And here I am, Director of Racial Equity at CVOEO, and I just completed my entire year of work in that organization. And what I want to say is that I realize how important it is to invite people from the marginalized community to the conversation. It is really important. We are the one who experience the challenges. So we are the one who can better explain the challenges and offer options on how to work the system out so that equity can be installed. So it is important to invite leaders of color in the conversation, and there are a lot of leaders out there. And sometimes I'm really surprised to see when I see the application forms when it says this and that years of experience, or English, excellent English skills required. Those are languages that are not appealing to people of color. When English is not your first language, your English skills cannot be excellent. So it is important to really work with the people that we have to train them. It is possible to train people. We have a lot of community members who are trained from their countries, who come to this country, who have a nice expertise. We just need to enroll them, to provide them with the necessary training, and they will be able to serve the community. And it will be a win for this country to not have necessarily to use an interpreter to relay a message to a patient or to a client. So it is a big win. So I was really happy to be invited to be part of the Just Transition subcommittee for the Climate Council, because the community member that I work with, the population I work with, the marginalized population, the low-income individual that I work with, consider climate change, environmental issues as an issue that is not really pressing to them because they have the social determinant of health to achieve first. When you don't have a decent housing, when you don't have a job, when you don't have a transportation, when you don't have food on the table, when your children are not safe, how can you allow time to issues of environmental change that are, yes, real, objective, but don't have an impact, maybe direct. However, it is a direct impact that people don't know, because with the precipitation, with the change in landscape, the air that we the air around us can be polluted, the water can be polluted. So there is a direct impact on the health. And it is the literature show that low-income individuals and people of color are significantly impacted by the consequences of climate change. But for the population that are served, it's not a really objective fact, because they have those pressing needs that they have to complete first. So we need to address that. We need also to make sure that the language that we are using is accessible to people. The language that we usually use is too academic. People don't get it. So we need to break that down so that the language is accessible to people. We need to make in plain language and not too wordy. So, very simple language that people can understand, and explain them fact that they can recognize themselves into, scenarios that they can, recognize themselves into, so that to raise an awareness and to have people take action. Because I believe that any plan, any action plan that we're going to elaborate without including the perspective of low-income individual and the marginalized community, is likely to fail. We need to develop plans that include everyone, and it is possible. We have community members that are available to participate in this kind of meetings. How many are we here? Yes. So please invite people, please reach out to me. We can make connections, and we can, have conversations and see how we can, improve the systems. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginie. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you started to transition to talking about the Climate Council and Climate Action Plan. And I'm glad you're sticking with the Just Transition subcommittee. Sue has been an integral part of that as well. And I know that process really matters. We've lost some people from the process because it's really hard to show up and volunteer. And we've tried to put some systems in place so people can do that. Sue, is there anything you can add? I'm also, appreciate what the secretary said. I'm still worried about who's going to be able to show up to those hearings and meetings. And how do you feel like we're really capturing less heard voices as the climate action plan moves towards finalization?
Yes, thank you so much, Virginie, and your eloquence is why I worked really hard to recruit you to join our Just Transitions Committee. And as we did for many others, I will just say that our Just Transitions Committee is a wonderful and rich group of very different voices. And honestly, I want to thank Senator Ram Hinsdale also for meeting with me early on in the process as I was sort of asked to become the co-chair of this committee, and how could we make it more legitimate, frankly. And she encouraged me to be really broad in our recruitment. So we did recruit actively a broad array of voices like Virginie, like members of the Native American community, like members of the migrant justice community, union activists, youth activists. We have come together in a totally virtual environment very quickly, but what I do want to mention is that has been the beginning. And we put together these guiding principles for a just transition that really came directly from the voices around this virtual table. Where we had spent a lot of time establishing trust and getting to know one another so that we felt the agency, all of us, each of us, to share deeply. And that's another thing that takes time. Establishing trust and agency. It can be enormously intimidating to be a participant in a conversation that you are new to. And that frankly, you've been never included into. So as much as we are trying, the council as a whole has hired consultants to sort of break that ground. I really feel that that's where we are in the evolution of this now. We're breaking ground. I've learned that it is my job to listen, to learn, to explore, to question my own biases, and to step aside. And a couple of other key things is in the events that we are actually helping to incentivize, to pay people to participate, to not assume that they have the ability and time to give to something. And we're also relying on people like Virginie. Each of us is doing outreach and mobilization and organizing, not just around the events, because for many of the folks we're trying to work with, we are just trying to begin a conversation around climate and how environmental impacts are affecting the lives of those folks we want to hear from. So, we're moving too quickly, essentially, to be moving at the speed of trust. But we're building connections, we're building understanding and language. And that we also want to make sure that the climate plan that we are presenting to the legislature as required by statute is not the final plan. It's an initial plan that will then continue to have more input. So we are exploring new ways. We aren't doing enough, and it's going too quickly. But it is new that equity and the voices of our rich community are actually being asked to participate, and that we're all learning together how to make that happen.
Thanks, Sue. So we have about 7 minutes left, and there are two pretty popular questions in Slido. I think I got that right. And so I'll start. A lot of them center around the Mileage Smart program, Sue. So it sounds like that really struck a chord. I mean, housing and transportation, we know, are major parts of our social determinants of health, as well as a major part of our emissions reduction goals. Can you talk a little bit more about, someone asked why private purchases can't be included, some technical challenges that you may be trying to overcome to improve the access and equity of the program. And then Virginie, we had a question about how local energy action committees can be more engaged with BIPOC and New American communities around the state. I think that's a great way to end. How can you reach out and build trust? What does that look like? In Virginie, that's kind of a lot to think about. So we'll come to you in a few minutes after we go to Sue about overcoming access barriers to Mileage Smart.
There's a lot. I almost feel like some of these technical questions I'd rather take offline because they may be sort of specific and narrow. But what I can say, there have been barriers to doing private sales. There's a lot that we need to audit. We need to ensure some trail of the ownership and the previous history of the car. And that it also relates to the bank's willingness to participate in loans. So there's more detail to that, but that's a big picture of it. That's the question I remember you asking. Was there another?
Yeah. Thankfully, Olivia reframed it in the middle there. There's a lot of questions, which is great, but she wanted to expand out more about transportation equity in the Climate Council plan. If there's anything else you wanted to say is sort of being advanced there right now, in addition to Mileage Smart.
I mean, we're at a very high level of thinking about strategies and pathways at the Climate Council. I will say at Capstone, you'll hear later today about the advance of a pitch that we first presented to a summit around how do we actually create almost an Uber system, a so-called, a shared mobility for people who don't have access to a car at all, and for whom fixed public transit services are not succeeding in meeting their needs while advancing the transformation to the electric fleet. So I'll just put that out there as a stay tuned. More on that later.
Thanks, Sue. And perhaps when Senator Perchlik comes up, he can share more about how transportation equity really made it into the future transportation vision for the state in a bigger way than even some of the advocates had anticipated this year. So we're grateful for that. Virginie, we would love to have you, do most of our concluding thoughts around how white allies or how energy action committees around the state that are largely populated with people who have time and resources can reach out to those who may not, and make sure they feel included in local energy action efforts.
Thank you so much, Senator Lindsay. I want to say something. The majority of the refugees who resettle in this country have never experienced winter. So it is something that they don't know about weatherization services. So it is really important to relay the information. You have a high you have a high bill. This is what you should do. There are services available for you can be free of charge for. So please apply. So again, it's about relay the message, a clear message in the plain language, so that people can understand that there is help, there are resources over there that can be accessed by people. We have a lot of community members that will be happy to participate in these similar events. So I can be a channel to connection with community member that we can invite, take part in this conversation, and they will get back to the community. There is the possibility to hold focus group to know exactly what the community members need. Need assessment, all those things are possible. So resources are there, available. Just ask what can we do? How can we work this out? And I receive a lot of email for a couple of people that are here. And I do my best to make the necessary connections, and I will be happy to continue doing so. Thank you
Thanks
so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Virginie. Thank you, Sue. Virginie, oh, good. Did you want to add something?
No, I
Okay.
I just want to make sure that I answer the question that I was asked to answer.
You did, and if I may put a fine point on it, people ask me the same question, and I think if I were to say what Virginie said so well in a very short way, I often tell people to remember to try and use curiosity, compensation, and connection. I think Virginie spoke so well to the curiosity about what is it like to move into a New England home when you've never experienced winter before? How do you really hear and understand that story and experience? Compensation, a really critical piece of all this. It doesn't always have to be financial compensation, but keep in mind that particularly coming out of a pandemic, some people have the capacity to volunteer and be present, and that's a growing divide between those who can and those who lost income and well-being in the pandemic, and their time is extremely precious. So if you're going to use it, at least make sure you have you're really centering their experience and story, and you're not wasting their time. But if you can compensate people, you should budget for that, and we should start thinking about that more in state government as well. And finally, connection. If you are going to have a meeting where you're encouraging more racial and cultural diversity, particularly, or even income diversity, make sure that person doesn't feel singled out, or that they're speaking in a monolithic way for others. And in fact, if you try to have a discussion or conversation where they're going to meet other people of color, other people who have a similar experience to theirs that they haven't met before, you've done them a great service, because they then can break isolation of what it feels like to be, cold in their home, experiencing winter without a lot of other people to engage with, breaking language barriers so that they can communicate about these issues. We did an environmental justice conversation where we were talking to Bhutanese elders, and through an interpreter, one of them said, I am not okay mentally, and I don't know where to go to get help. And so many people commented that just being able to say, I'm not okay in a very isolating pandemic was really important, to just know they had community out there. You all have more tools and resources to help build that community, and I hope you use them wisely. So I just really want to thank the panelists. There's been a request for us to share our contact information. I know Sue and I can easily put that in the chat. Virginie, if you don't mind, I'll also put your email address in the chat as well. And I'm sure Cara and Jared can help with the in-person folks. And really appreciate, Sue, Virginie, all the work that you do and the ways that you are showing that equity is the bridge to the future and the light at the crossroads.